Welcome to HSD, a place to critically think. Today we're going to be responding to Cosmic Skeptic's EXvegan post on his YouTube channel community page. I have Paradigm Plant-Based Jedi, who is a YouTuber, content creator, and I have History Strongest Desire, who's also going to be doing a response with us. So with that being said, Paradigm, why don't you introduce yourself, and you can re-upload this to your own channel, by the way.
Sure, I appreciate that. My name is Paradigm. I create vegan content on the side, although I'm working to get more into it. And yeah, I'm just happy to be here. If anyone wants, I'm sure there'll be a link to my stuff around.
Awesome. Okay, so with that being said, Paradigm, why don't we get into this? You can read the post, and then we can all discuss together.
Yeah, sounds good. So this was posted exactly 1 day ago on his YouTube community posts, and it reads as follows. Hi everyone. Recently, I've noticed people wondering why I've been so inactive and wondering why I have not uploaded any veganism related content. For quite some time, I've been reevaluating my ethical position on eating animals, which is something people have also noticed, but what you will not know is that I have also been struggling privately to maintain a healthy plant-based diet. I wanted to let you know that because of this, I have for some time now been consuming animal products again, primarily but not exclusively seafood, and experimenting with how to best integrate into my life. I am interested in philosophy and never enjoy sharing personal information about myself, but I can obviously see why this particular update is both necessary and relevant. It is not my intention to go into too much detail here, as I think that will require more space and perhaps a video, but rather to let you know, with more details to follow later. My opposition to factory farming remains unchanged, as do my views regarding the need to view non-human animals as morally worthy beings whose interests ethically matter. However, I am no longer convinced of the appropriateness of an individual-focused boycott in responding to these problems, and am increasingly doubtful of the practicality of maintaining a healthy plant-based diet in the long term. Again, for reasons I hope to go into in more detail at a later date. At the very least, even if I am way off base and totally mistaken in my assessments, I do not wish to see people consuming a diet on my account if I have been unable to keep up that diet myself. Even if I am making a mistake, in other words, I want it to be known that I have made it. I imagine that the responses to this will vary, and I understand why this might come as a huge disappointment to some of my followers. I am truly sorry for having so rigorously at times, and perhaps too unforgivingly, advocated for a behavior change that I myself have not been able to maintain. I've changed my mind and behaviors publicly on a great many things before, but this feels the most difficult to address by a large margin. I did not wish to speak about it until I was sure that I couldn't make it practically work. Some of you will not care. Some may understand. Some will be angry, and others upset. Naturally, this is quite embarrassing and humbling moment, so I also understand and accept that there will be some "I told you so's." Whatever the case, please know that this experience has inspired a deep self-reflection, and that I will be duly careful in the future regarding the forthrightness of my convictions. I am especially sorry to those who are now vegan activists on account of my content, and hope that they know I will still effort with you to bring about the end of factory farming. To them, and to everyone else, I appreciate your viewership and engagement as always, as well as your feedback and criticisms. And that's how it ends.
Yeah, I muted my I muted me on it. I muted myself on OBS on my side. Do you ever just sometimes feel like you wish you could just blow up the world because humanity is just too fucking self-centered? Jeez.
I know what you mean. It's definitely, I tend to lean towards misanthropy more often the more I see failures of humanity, and particularly with respect to animal agriculture.
For me, I'm not even sure if it's misanthropy. Like, if we were to take like in a hypothetical human like lions or dogs, if we could genetically modify them to the point where they're just as smart as a human being, like I think feel some of the same frustrations.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
or a lion. And there's probably other species out there that are more aggressive by nature that would be worse. Like a lion with a human's intelligence. Holy shit. Uh, they would have to fight quite a bit of instincts to follow a lot of ethical rules that human beings follow. Um, but with that being said, right? Who wishes to take the floor first? I'm more than happy to.
Yeah, why don't you go for it?
Um,
Unless HSD or History's Strongest Desire had something to say, maybe.
Well, I was just saying, you go ahead first. It's your podcast or whatever.
okay, so I guess we'll all take turns. So I think the first thing I want to, because I have a few notes here I was writing down. So the when he was talking about being sorry for vegan activists on his own account, and that he himself could not keep up a vegan diet, it made me think a lot about Sam Harris. Um, more or less like the Babylon Project. I was discussing it with him, and he was trying to explain to me that Sam Harris tried a vegan diet, but it didn't work. And I remember hearing your definition of veganism. I'll pull up mine right now. It actually wasn't that bad. Paradigm. What was your definition again?
Oh, I'd have to pull it up. If I can try to remember off the top of my head, it's that veganism is a philosophy, justice movement, and way of living which seeks to place a higher value on animal life and well-being as opposed to substitutable classes of goods and services. That is to say that if one can practically or reasonably abstain from cruelty towards sentient beings, that this would be in accordance with the principles of veganism.
Yeah. So which yours is much better than most definitions. Um, because it's more or less because like I could come up with some reductios and we could debate that, right? But in and
Mm-hmm.
of itself, it's not the worst I've heard. But when you're sort of like Cosmic Skeptic, when I was hearing him discuss it with hearing him on a podcast with Earthling Ed, he actually said multiple times, I think I've heard him say that thinks veganism is reducing suffering as much as practically possible. So I'll just read my short definition and I'll expand. So veganism is a way of life that seeks to uphold value and or consideration for sentient beings above the following: product, service, slavery, addiction, profit, peer pressure, or use made from them. Not to say that you cannot use sentient beings, however, to try and value and consider them above said use within your system of ethics on a spectrum. The spectrum valuing sentient beings is primarily focused on different groups of sentient beings. And if I could add anything to it that I didn't quite put in there, it was usually underprivileged sentient beings. But I think like what was it? So what is the point I'm trying to get at here? Is like his definition of veganism is already on shaky grounds. Number one. Number two. When it comes down to it, just because something doesn't necessarily work for you, or just because you are not necessarily successful at something, I don't think that's a reason just for someone else not to do something. For example, like I mean, I think I'm going the wrong direction. I'm sorry. Well, no, it's a part of it, but I think the main part of which I'm trying to get at here is, I remember when we were talking about Sam Harris, and something I said to the Babylon Project was, even if Sam Harris, let's say he had a 1 in a million, or 1 in 100,000, or 1 in 1,000 conditions where he could not be vegan, I don't think that's a good reason to argue that other people shouldn't be vegan. Like more, we shouldn't like design moral systems purely based off of like what works for us as individuals, right? Because it's easy to make any moral system where you yourself are successful at it, or you yourself are good. Like it's easy to set up any system where things just so happen to benefit you. But it's a lot harder to like let's just say Cosmic Skeptic has a 1 in a million conditions. It's a lot harder to admit that these animals should deserve consideration, even if he can't. Uh, Even if he can't be eating plant based, because it's a lot easier to tell yourself that they do not deserve any moral consideration um, when you're eating them. And it's a like I think I've called it like psychological easing. Like, and I've noticed this too when people use arguments that sound fallacious, but they're not appealing to something. Like they're not appealing to popularity, but they're bringing up popularity. Like people often do this where they'll sort of psychologically ease themselves with their own decisions to the point where, like psychologically, there's almost a sliver of difference between a fallacy and
Yeah, yeah. Can I chime
at
in
their
here?
true intentions. Sure.
Yeah. So yeah, let's see where was the he said that he doesn't want people to be consuming a vegan diet like on account of his content or something like that. Where was that?
Yeah,
He
What's
was
the quote?
Oh, yeah, he was actually, I believe that was referring specifically to the vegan
Yeah.
activists. He said, I am especially sorry to those who are vegan activists on account of my content, and I hope they know I will still effort with you to bring about the end of factory farming.
Well, I was talking about, he said, at the very least, even if I am way off base and totally mistaken in my assessments, I do not wish to see people consuming a diet on my account if I have been unable to keep up that diet myself. That
Right.
that sounded like kind of more like what HS2 is talking about. Because
well,
Yeah.
like me,
no, I mean, I kind of touched on it, but it was, for me, it was something deeper. It was that your moral system shouldn't purely be based on what you are successful or good at, or what is easy for
yeah, yeah,
you. Like,
yeah,
like for example, if I had to, let's say, kill people for a living, let's say in a third world nation, um, it'd be a lot easier for me to create some sort of moral system where I can tell myself, like, what I'm doing is absolutely fine. And then imagine like a year or two later, or 10 years later, I don't have to kill anyone in order to survive, but I keep telling myself I have to. Like,
yeah,
or imagine if like I'm in a third world nation, I'm killing people in order to survive, and I'm talking to someone in a first world nation. It would, imagine if somebody's killing somebody just for pleasure. Um, it might be difficult for that person who's killing people in order to survive. It might be difficult for that. It might be easier for that person to believe that it's moral. Because if that person admits to themselves what they're doing is, unethical, immoral, maybe there's some other means for that person to survive in the third world nation. It's more difficult. Like, I'm
yeah,
actually getting at the fact that people use morality as like a crutch for their own decision to psychologically ease themselves for their own shortcomings, and quite often for their own cognitive dissonance. Like that
yeah.
that's what I'm
Well,
getting at. And I'm sorry, I went to work, I'm tired.
yeah. Well, I think I agree with you. What's the opposite of a virtue? Like
I would just call it a negative virtue, or a
okay. I think my like biggest negative virtue is like laziness, right? But I'll say this, like I when I'm talking to my friends, I won't go easy on them for being lazy, right? Like I won't, and I think that that's fair. I think that that's good. Like you shouldn't, just because something is like, let's say just because you have a problem, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't want other people to not have that problem. So when he's saying like, "Oh, I'm struggling to maintain this diet," which I think that that's silly in itself, but even if he says that, like why would he not want other people to be successful here?
Yeah, I know Paradigm wanted to talk about that subject too. Paradigm, would you like to speak? And like I know Paradigm particularly want to talk about this. So I hope you know, like, that wasn't the point I was trying to get at earlier.
Oh, no, you're totally fine. Well, I mean, I believe that, I think I completely agree with what you two were saying here. And, I think that as far as that was one of the things that stuck out to me in the entire post, especially was when I heard him saying, if I do not wish to see people consuming a diet on my account if I have been unable to keep up that diet myself. And so it almost seems like it's a countervailing point to the one he brought up earlier, where he mentioned that my views have remained unchanged regarding the need to view non human animals as morally worthy beings whose interests ethically matter. Right. So if that's the case, then like how and why would you not want other people to be consuming a diet on your account, even if you had been unable to keep up that diet? It seems really strange to me.
I mean, I think what I said earlier kind of explains it. Like, so for example, imagine you're debating someone, you're talking to someone about veganism, and something they say is, well, most people eat meat. And he's not saying it's morally good. He's just saying, oh, well, most people eat meat. Um, and what if he said most people just follow their traditions? He's saying, I don't think it's justified, but most people do. It's a form of psychological easing. And I think when I was talking about the third world, it wasn't a great example. Like a great example might be a situation where, let's say, there's a cutthroat businessman, and he doesn't necessarily have to be really cruel to his employees or even his competition, or he doesn't have to be really cruel to people. But if he tells himself that being cruel to others is fine, then he himself doesn't have to feel bad about his behavior. You know, imagine if he had to be cruel to other people to run his business. It would be a lot more difficult for him to acknowledge, just in a hypothetical, let's say he has to be cruel to people to run his business. Let's just say these people he's working with, he just has to be this way. Or else he won't be motivated. It's a lot harder to admit to himself that even though this is how things are right now, this isn't how things ideally should be. Like at some point, like morality needs to go beyond your own performance. Like how self-absorbed are you? Do you have to create a moral system to justify you? Like shouldn't your moral system exist on some sort of like emotional principle outside of your own capacity? Like it's already bad enough we're so flawed. It's beautiful, but it's bad enough. But we're being not only do we base our moral systems off our own emotions, but then to take it a step further and then base our moral systems on our own on just our own capacity. Like you know what I'm saying, Paradigm? Like when you think about it like that, it makes total sense.
Yeah,
Like
definitely.
like imagine being a business owner and talking to other business owners and saying, "Hey man, if you don't have to be like cutthroat like me, you shouldn't be." You know? Like at that point you'd have to admit to yourself that like what you're doing is fucking terrible. Like
Right. And I think another analogy that we could even use is, for example, like I might have the value that like murdering someone in order to continue my existence would be an example of something that was morally wrong, right? But if I find myself stranded on an island in a plane crash and there's nothing else to eat except for other people, you know, there's no telling what my starved brain might come to as a conclusion, as a justification. But that doesn't mean that the morality that I was holding like necessarily changes. It's just that I wouldn't have the mental capacities to actually go through with it. And so, in the same sense, where if you have moral values that you think are important, then even if you are incapable of living up to them, that shouldn't change the actual values that you're putting in place for your moral system, as you
yeah.
were explaining.
Yeah, you articulated much better. But yeah, that's what I'm saying is like your moral systems shouldn't be purely based off of what you can accomplish. Like your moral systems should be based a little bit outside your own capacity to some extent. It shouldn't be purely based on your own capacity. It should be based off the principles and intuitions that you have, being both logical and emotional. But yeah, if Cosmic Skeptic got in a plane crash on an island, if you're with him, and if he ate someone, imagine him coming back to civilization, writing a post. I no longer believe that human beings are worthy of moral consideration. I enjoy eating them,
Oh man,
but
that would
I
be
will
rough.
promise you that I will try to advocate that we can kill humans humanely.
Oh man.
And I apologize for anyone that was against human rights atrocities on my behalf. Or no, against anyone that was against murdering humans on my own behalf. I apologize. But I stand with you against torturing of human beings. Uh,
And I feel like there must be a part of him that recognizes this like discontinuity because, as he mentioned at one point, I've changed my mind and behaviors publicly on a great many things before, but this feels the most difficult to address by a large margin. And I imagine that's because he's feeling that, like I was mentioning, that discontinuity between values and what he's actually able to achieve.
what does the term discontinuity mean?
Oh, discontinuity is like it's essentially like, how do I explain this? It's like it's kind of like incongruency essentially, right?
Um,
Does it does that help clear it up?
no. By the way, for bringing in the chat, just letting you know this, we're responding to Cosmic Skeptic right now. Um, no, not quite. Sorry, what was the word you
Let me
used?
think of how else. Oh, discontinuity.
Could you maybe explain that in another way, or?
Yeah, let me see if I can see a sharp, as according to the definition that I'm looking up, it would be a sharp difference in characteristics between parts of something. Is that better?
A break or gap. I think you could also just say like a break or gap in his morals, yeah.
Sure.
Um, yeah, it's I think like there's also the possibility that he only cares because of the backlash he's going to get. If the truth be told, I kind of like when he was debating Michaela Peterson, like Lifting Vegan Logic made a video essentially arguing that he goes too light on that Cosmic Skeptic goes too light on Michaela Peterson because like Michaela Peterson didn't want to debate vegan gains because she's the daughter of a like of a fucking of a garbage tier intellectual like Jordan B. Peterson. I see Jordan Peterson as the same garbage hack as like Noam Chomsky. The only difference is I'm more aligned to him because I'm more right leaning, but I'm libertarian. I don't conform to what was it pointless unjustified traditions, by the way. Um, but when it comes to like what was it fucking Michaela Peterson, she wouldn't debate vegan gains because he knew what he was talking about. But she was willing to debate or talk with Cosmic Skeptic, interview, debate, whatever. When she brought up like how that she doesn't believe that veganism can be a healthy diet. Um, Cosmic Skeptic said that yeah, people should be skeptical of the science regarding plant-based diets, but they should also be skeptical of the science towards your diet as well. Like to an extent, that's like a fair, honest assessment, but at the same time, like the overwhelming consensus is that being plant-based is healthy. And I'll put my thumbnails and link in the description down below. Like I made videos. My videos recorded talking about America Uncovered plant-based meats. I'll include some of my podcasts about dairy, and all these sources, all the studies are in the description. But there are so many fucking YouTubers, whether it be Vegan Gains, Mike the Vegan, Avi, Healthy Happy Vegan. Like there's tons of content creators that create content, but they also include scientific sources and stats. Like the debate is over. Um, I don't know. At this point, I'm just feeling frustrated, rambling. But essentially, what I'm trying to say is like, I kind of gave Cosmic Skeptic some charity because like I realized Cosmic Skeptic had what was the word? Cosmic Skeptic had Cosmic Skeptic he's an atheist. He focuses more on religion. Like asking him like to for me to sit down and ask Cosmic Skeptic to put in the time and effort to read all the fucking studies I've read about health and environment is unrealistic. And also being plant-based, it's undeniably better for the environment. I did one video on that, and I'll be doing more videos about the environment, responding to America Uncovered. If you want to learn about biodiversity loss and how pretty much the best way you can actually help save oxygen on the planet is by going plant-based, go watch that video. And I didn't even talk about what was it? Deforestation, the loss of carbon sinks. I just talked about phytoplankton. um, yeah, it's just more or less like the debate is over, and I don't think Cosmic Skeptic was a very educated vegan to begin with. So he went into
No.
this subject a little bit ill-equipped. But he was equipped philosophically. But now we're starting to see a little bit more of his character. To say quite bluntly, another self-centered idiot. Paradigm, would you like to or desire
Yeah, you know what? I
know
want to point out.
I know I
I don't
ramble,
know.
sorry guys.
Oh, you're
Yeah,
totally fine.
I don't know if you guys remember this, but I remember Cosmic Skeptic. Um, he said that humans have rights and non-human animals don't have rights. And
There was that weird video.
yeah, well, but he talked about it in more than one video. He said that, and then I remember he was talking to Earthling Ed, and he said it again. And
Um,
I I really think that the Cosmic Skeptic isn't even really philosophically equipped because I mean that position is ridiculous, and he had absolutely no defense for it.
no, but I think he's philosophically equipped in the sense that he's studied philosophy. He has some concept of like philosophical reasoning. But then that comes to like that's why I brought up the definition. Like, it's not just philosophically equipped. It's more like the philosophical niche of actually thinking through what veganism is. Like, I can hands down say like I think Paradigm's definition and my definition is much easier to defend than saying unnecessary suffering or the vegan society's garbage definition.
Oh man, that definition is so terrible.
Oh yeah, fucking like literally give me a gun and blow my brains out.
I have a
Yeah,
whole video about it.
yeah, Frank. Yeah, which I'll put in the description down below that video since you mentioned it.
Word. It's
Hey Frank, I'm gonna. If you come into this chat, you can't be fucking trolling. Like I'm recording right now, just letting you know. So I'm gonna invite you, so you can come in here. We're responding to Cosmic Skeptic, so understand that I don't want. If you don't have anything important to say, shut the fuck up, or else I'm gonna like take you off the stage. Frank's one of my friends. Anyways, hey Paradigm, you don't mind me bringing in other people, do you?
no, go right ahead.
Okay, so yeah, Paradigm, would you like to, yeah, more or less, Chatty, I think what I wanted to get at with Cosmic Skeptic is, like, yeah, I'm not saying that, like, philosophically, like, all of his ideas for veganism are good. I just think that he hadn't really thought through a lot of his ideas, and maybe he wasn't in a place to really challenge a lot of his ideas as well on veganism. But I'm just saying he was philosophically equipped in the sense he knew a bit about philosophy. Yo, Paradigm, would you like to say something?
Sure. I mean, I guess just one more thing that I wanted to point out was he mentioned that he did not want to speak about it until he was sure that he couldn't make it practically work. And he is speaking about it now, which implies that he's sure now that he could not make it practically work. I find that very interesting. He obviously did not go into much detail, which he deliberately did, as he mentioned in the post. But it will be very interesting to see how he expounds on that later.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know. Like, no offense, Springy. I think I'd rather have like the vegans responding to this. Like, maybe I'll bring you in, but like we're mainly trying to discourage carnism, and I know you're carnist.
Yeah,
Which
actually,
it
can
might be it
I?
might be useful to bring him in to discuss it, but like maybe once we have like what we want to say, and yeah. Oh, yo, Chatty, what do you want to
Well,
say?
yeah, that seems like an interesting juxtaposition because yeah, you're right. He's saying that he's sure that he can't make it work, which seems pretty silly if like I understand the research at all. But on top of that, he also said that I mean he said he wanted to go like more in depth in another post. I think he implied that he couldn't in this one, which was kind of silly to me because if he's sure about this, then you think that he'd have a case, and so he would just present that.
I mean,
Right.
what do you? He has logic and facts, bro. He got stranded on an island. He ate a human. Now he came back to the UK, and now it's okay to eat humans. But he will, and he apologizes for anyone that believed that not murdering people is wrong. But he'll advocate to end torturing humans. I mean, like jokes aside, right? Mind if I say a few more things?
Please go ahead.
All right. So yeah, yeah. I mean, um, yeah. If he still cares about animals, like why? By the way, this was my words last night. Springy said this. One of the audience members. If he still cares about animals, like why even continue to consume them? Like, Spring has said some pretty cool things. These are his ideas, so I'm going to give him full credit. If anyone knows him in the Discord community, like outside of a lot of European nations and first world nations, there's a lot of people in the third world that are plant-based and they're healthy. There are some instances where looking at population studies, people who are plant-based live way fucking longer and they're way healthier. And then on top of that, like cholesterol, saturated fat, they're causally related to heart disease. It's not even a debate through millions of control trials. I believe medallion study, cohorts. It's just like, or at least millions of years, I think, of control trials. Or was it millions of years? Anyways, yeah, it's the overwhelming evidence is just undeniable. The overwhelming evidence of the correlation with cancer and meat. And then it's debatable if like plant-based foods protect against cancer or if meats are carcinogenic. But either way, it's just the facts are in. And like I think I wanted to say this too, like I could technically be skeptical of any science, right? Like I could be skeptical of global warming. And then I could go into somebody, and I've done this before. Like I could come into a channel and say, well, I'm skeptical of global warming. I haven't looked into it. There is a problem with that. Like if you're not really going to take the time and discipline to do your research and do your homework, um, anyone can come on to a stage, especially celebrities, and when they're expressing opinions about something scientific, if they haven't really looked into it that much, like, is it irresponsible when lots of people are going to be following and listening to them? Especially when those celebrities they're not garbage, they're not intellectually illiterate. Like, Cosmic Skeptic he has some level of intelligence. I guess what I'm trying to get at here is, like, my Tumblr friend, my Twitter friend told me that there's no difference between men and women when it comes to intelligence. I could be skeptical if there's any difference when it comes to like intellectual talents. And by the way, I don't mean like IQ intelligence. I mean like intellectual talents, and I could be skeptical of how much of all of everything that men do and everything that women do. I could be skeptical of how much of it is nurture and how much of it is nature. But I guess the problem I'll somewhat arrive to with whenever somebody has skepticism towards anything that's scientific, it's not that it's wrong to be skeptical. It's great. But the problem is when there is already pre-existing, when there's lots of pre-existing evidence on the subject, and if someone didn't have the time or discipline to really take a good look at it, I think that's where I start to take an issue on the subject. Is that essentially skepticism of science? On one hand, it can promote critical thinking. On the other hand, it can also promote denialism, or scientific narratives, or scientific consensus. Because I think it's good to challenge them, but if it's challenging any scientific consensus in a faulty way, or through any level of fallacious data picking or interpreting, then essentially it can either help normalize or promote science denialism. Like, do you guys agree with me, or what do you think?
Yeah, you know what? I
About my
agree.
opinion,
Yeah, I guess.
um,
Yeah, you can go ahead, Frank, if you have
I
something to say.
personally believe that not believing in science is the worst thing you can do for yourself, because then you could fall into your own biased narrative.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of like the problem is it's good to be critical of any scientific consensus. It's good to be critical of scientific narratives, but there's a difference between being critical and then being too lazy to look it up, or
Yeah,
incompetently interpreting the data. Which it's okay to make mistakes, but you should look it up. And I don't get me wrong, I've made claims scientifically without actually really having the discipline to go and look it up, or not knowing how to look it up. But I think
But
Cosmic Skeptic is probably smart enough to know how to look it up. Maybe I'm wrong.
I would disagree with that statement. It's not okay to spread misinformation. If you're gonna say something is facts, then you have to go do your research
No,
about
no, yeah, but I already said that. Like I already stated the fact that when you have a large audience, then I think there's some level of responsibility of looking it up. before you state your skepticism of scientific narratives.
Yeah.
When there's already overwhelming pre-existing evidence. And I've made this mistake in the past, and maybe in the future I will, but I think it's good to acknowledge that a lot of people make this mistake. Like, you know what I'm saying, Frank?
Yes, I know what you're saying.
Yeah, like there's been
Yeah.
scientists who've already been critical towards other narratives, such as that you need meat in order to survive, or men evolved to protect and take care of women, and men historically evolutionary would protect women when they were pregnant, when that's not really common in the animal kingdom. Almost every single I don't know if it's every female species, but like a lot of female species can take care of themselves when pregnant.
Well,
Can
but
hunt.
humans are different in many different ways from the common animal, so I wouldn't
Yeah,
doubt that.
I don't. Yeah, but that is a possibility, but I don't think that's the case. I'm just saying that there's overwhelming evidence. I'm saying somebody had to criticize that narrative, to be critical of it, like to try and find a better narrative. I'm saying like it's good to be critical of narratives and or consensus, but the criticism has to have merit. And when you have a large audience, you have to take responsibility, or else you can fall into your own confirmation bias, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
I don't want
the thing
to
that
go off track here. It was just
yeah
an
the
example.
the thing that you said that I liked was something like there's a difference between being critical of something and being too lazy to look it up. Like because Cosmic Skeptic has no idea what he's talking about with nutrition, obviously. I
Yeah,
mean, and he's not. If he ever follows this up, I guarantee you, well, whatever he talks about, it's gonna be garbage. Like, but
like also
but
like if Cosmic, I think I'm gonna put this in the video like right at the beginning. If Cosmic Skeptic sees this, all of us here would be happy to talk to you. Correct?
Oh yeah,
I
absolutely.
don't think he would, but all of us would be happy to talk to you in private or publicly and help educate you, and we can go through the hierarchy of evidence, and we can also give you tools so you can evaluate scientific knowledge on your own without us. Agreed?
Hundred
I
percent.
yeah,
agree.
Yeah. Okay. What were you saying, Chatty?
yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. It's just this point that when you say you're skeptical of something, the implication is that like there isn't a lot of evidence that you've looked into it and there isn't a lot of evidence for something. But I think that there's a wealth of evidence that a plant-based diet can be absolutely healthy for pretty much everyone.
Yeah, like there's the
And
one. Yeah, like there's the one meta-analysis looking at 31 different or 30 something meta-analyses, and they show that when people consume the most amount of fiber, they have the lowest level of heart disease. I can't remember what type of heart disease, but even when they looked at supplements of fiber, people taking supplements, taking just supplements of fiber in the majority of the studies actually showed lowering of LDL cholesterol. And you know the sad thing is LDL isn't even technically bad. The only reason why it's bad is because people are eating too much fucking artificial trans fat, saturated fat, and cholesterol. And where can you get saturated fat and cholesterol? Animal products, especially dairy. It's just
yeah,
the debate is over. Like, there's a reason why Canada took dairy out of the health guide, and not to say like Canada's like the authority makes it right, but I'm just saying there's a reason why a lot of authorities are not really recommending dairy as much as they used to, is because there's more and more evidence, that's damning evidence, just coming out about dairy. Like even that giant meta-analysis looking at like tons of different studies, even industry funded studies, they still found that there was more of a correlation with cancer than there was a decrease with cancer. And if you took out the industry funded studies, it would go even higher. That's terrifying.
But I do have a question.
What's up?
So, like, what about like pescatarians and those types of people?
I haven't looked too much into pescatarians, but usually they have similar health At least so I've heard from like but honestly, I mean like I haven't looked too much into pescatarians. I should probably hold my tongue. Uh I mean like there was a one I can't remember which study it was, but there was one study where pescatarians had similar health outcomes as vegans. Paradigm, have you looked into pescatarians?
Yeah, as far as I've looked into it, I'm pretty sure that eating fish could be considered a healthy food. I have no qualms about saying that, but at the same time, then obviously there's the whole ethical justification where, it might be ethically horrendous to consume fish, even if it's healthy.
I think my biggest issue with fish isn't so much like the just the product itself. A part of it is, but like obviously there's probably there could be what was it like it's been a long time since I've looked at it, so I might be wrong on this, but the last time I looked at it, like people who were plant-based still usually had a lower correlation with cancer than pescatarians, but I think something to keep in mind with pescatarians is actually I went over this in my environmental video when I looked at our world data. Um uh like basically factory farm fishing, so like fish basically I call it factory farm fishing, cultured fish, whatever. Raising fish in their own ship pens, it's becoming more and more common. And it's actually in recent years surpassed wild capture caught fishing. So basically, in the ocean, it's like there's a lot of plastic, there's a lot of pollutants, um, and then more importantly, like when you're eating food that was raised in a ship pen, you obviously it's not exactly the most sanitary product. So I mean, like as far as health outcomes, I would probably say if I had to take a guess, being plant based would be healthier, just based off the means of production. Because you're avoiding a lot of pollutants. But overall, if I had to, at least from what I remember looking at Nutrition Made Simple, and the last I looked at the studies, because I have not looked at pescatarians that much. Pescatarians would be the closest diet that usually keeps up with vegans and people who are plant based. Would you agree with
Um,
that paradigm, or?
Yeah, I would. Definitely pescatarian style diets, especially like Mediterranean in particular, and to have very similar outcomes to a full plant-based diet.
speaking about means of
But yo,
production.
Frank.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just gonna say this right here. No offense, but like, if you're not talking about the video, it's time to stop the subject.
No, 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 no. I'm gonna start talking about the video.
Okay, well, yeah, because like, keep in mind, like, what you just said right here, right now, I'm probably gonna crop it out and turn it into another video, maybe, or I'm probably just gonna take it completely out of the video. So
Okay. But
yeah,
he said he.
it's like literally don't do that again. It is annoying.
Okay, sorry, my bad.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, say it, whatever.
Okay. So like he said he doesn't really like condone factory farming, if I remember like the video correctly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was in the post.
But like wouldn't that be like hypocritical for him to like then go buy like meat and all that kind of stuff? Because like I don't see a way that he would like get meat from like a farm if he's living in the big city necessarily.
He disconnected.
I think what Frank said is like he doesn't see how you could get like these products without a fact like it's not what he said, but Frank said like he doesn't really see how you can get these products when you live in the big city. Like he thinks it's kind of hypocritical. And I think that kind of does bring home like a point that I think both Paradigm and me haven't quite touched on is like the factory farming thing. Paradigm, do you have any thoughts? Oh shit, where'd Paradigm go? Did he leave us? Do we have to finish this video alone?
He's in the audience right now.
Okay, one sec. Okay, invite to speak.
Sorry about that. I seem to be having connection issues.
Hey you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, do you have any thoughts on the whole factory farming thing?
Yeah, well, he said it was hypocritical. Like, hypocritical with respect to what value specifically?
That he's against factory farming.
Right. I meant, like, what value does he hold that being against factory farming makes him a hypocrite?
That he's like going out to buy like most of these factory farmed products just because he
Well,
doesn't want to. Go
I,
ahead, my
I
bad.
think no, you're fine. I think to be fair, he hasn't actually admitted that he's purchasing products from factory farms, so we don't actually know this. Um, but I mean, it is reasonable to assume that there's a high probability, for example, if he's getting his food from regular stores and restaurants, this would indeed be the case.
So I think that brings up something I want to talk to is like when he said, maybe you could read it over or we could put it on the screen, like something he said when he was talking about that he doesn't believe individual boycott and individual choice is effective or something along the
Yeah,
lines of that.
yeah, that was
Um,
actually very interesting.
I think what bothers me about that is like me and Frank were talking about this last night. It's like supply and demand, right? So a portion of economics you can understand through life experience. A portion of it you'd be wise to watch some videos, maybe look at some studies. And a portion of it you can understand through talking, discussing, and debating. Um, do you agree with that assessment, Paradigm?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so like I haven't heard an argument against supply and demand. And most intellectually honest communists and socialists would agree that supply and demand would still exist within a socialist or communist nation. And what frustrates me when people talk about like, or at least what I would consider to be intellectually honest, because like somebody can, perhaps maybe I shouldn't say that, but I guess what I'm trying to say is like most socialists and communists I meet or I've met personally, would agree with the fact that supply and demand would still exist in a socialist or communist nation. So whenever I
I
hear
mean,
people talk about like, hold on, Frank. Whenever I hear people talk about like wanting to like try and what was it? Having taking an issue with personal choice. One of my biggest issues with that is the fact that supply and demand would still exist. Sorry, on the subject of veganism, when it comes to the effectiveness of personal choice, there are certain things within an economy that needs to be done, needs to be regulated, or needs to be monitored by the state. But there are certain things that are driven by market demands. So even if you changed, let's say, an economic system, even if you changed a policy, the problem, so like if the government of UK tried to get rid of factory farming, what would happen? Um, Farmers would go overseas where they could essentially raise factory farming and then they would just sell it back to the United Kingdom. Farmers would, and then people could buy from the UK. But the other problem is like factory farming, at least for cows, it creates way more emissions. And then there's also the other problem. Hey, Paradigm, you there?
Yeah,
So,
my internet keeps cutting out as well.
so
I'm
I
not
think,
sure. It
I
might be
think,
Discord.
yeah, I think the point at which I'm trying to get at here is like, let's say if they decided to basically try and get rid of factory farming, the price of these products would go up. And the odds are in a society where people don't really value the worth of an animal, um, I think a lot. It's hard to like. It's hard to make the argument that if an animal doesn't quote unquote have worth, while at the same time they have enough worth that you don't want them to be tortured to death. Like they're not a worthy human. They're not. I can't remember the way of Cosmic Skeptic, but they're not worthy of moral consideration for their own interests. Or how did he say it?
Well, he actually said that his position remains unchanged with respect to his views regarding the need to view non-human animals as morally worthy beings whose interests ethically matter. So what he's actually saying is that he still believes that animals are morally worthy beings whose interests ethically matter. However, he followed that up immediately by saying, I am no longer convinced of the appropriateness of an individual-focused boycott in responding to these problems.
Yeah, if their interests matter, then why kill them in the first place? It to me
That's a great question.
it just to me it doesn't make sense. But it's I
And,
think I
you know,
think I think like I can short and summarize what I'm trying to say here because I ramble too much. But like in short and summary, supply and demand is going to exist. Like certain things can be effectively changed to the government. If we got rid of factory farming, the cost would go up. It's better for controlling greenhouse gas emissions when it comes to certain types of animal products. But then there's also the problem of controlling waste. In some ways, factory farms, it focuses waste into one specific area. Now, one of the positives of perhaps maybe having like a non-factory farming is it would distribute this waste where it wouldn't concentrate into a single portion, a single area. But then it also becomes harder to, in and of itself, there could be other unforeseen complications. Like the problem in and of itself, I guess what I'm trying to say here is no matter how you twist and turn it, like the average person would have to reduce their animal consumption. And that begs the question, like, does Cosmic Skeptic believe that people should reduce their animal consumption? And even then, like, if you're fine with killing an animal, like, then how do you convince people to get rid of factory farm? How do you convince the average Joe to get rid of factory farm? I don't know. I think I'm done here. Paradigm, you want to say something?
Sure. I mean, I think that this is a particularly poignant point because it is the most strong position that he took. I mean, instead of saying, for example, later on, where he's like, I'm increasingly doubtful of the practicality of maintaining a healthy plant-based diet in the long term, he actually said, I am no longer convinced of the appropriateness of an individual-focused boycott. And so that's a pretty strong position to take. And I find it really baffling, to be honest, because I mean, it's pretty intuitive, as you were mentioning before, with respect to supply and demand, but we actually do have data behind this, right? Like we can look and see that our individual choices with respect to whether or not we're buying animal products does in fact affect the total number of animals that are made to suffer. And
Yeah,
this is due to
it's undeniable.
absolutely.
Like, what was it? Was it
And
two?
so
Oh, sorry, you go.
oh no, I think that brings the question to the table, like what on earth could have convinced him that there's a lack of appropriateness in an individual focused boycott in responding to these problems?
I'm just gonna take a guess here. It's probably gonna be some sort of Okay, I'm right leaning. Forgive me. It's probably gonna be a garbage tier leftist argument where, if I had to take a guess, where he believes that the government needs to come in and step in and get rid of factory farms or something, or outlaw factory farming, which to me, it sounds like a joke. It sounds like the dumbest fuck. Like, here's the thing, like, if you outlawed factory farming, like you could you could have a very similar problem to making meat illegal. You could just literally create a huge black market as well. Um, it's so comedic to me. It's not even funny. But it's just um yeah, when it comes down to it all, I mean, like, wasn't it the one of the largest dairy producers in 29, was it 2019, 2018? I keep forgetting. But one of the largest dairy producers in the United States within recent years went bankrupt. Probably got bailed out by the government for all I know, but I mean, like, and this isn't something that's new. Like, a lot of these animal products are competing in a market for plant-based alternatives now. And if more people buy the plant-based alternatives, then that becomes more common. It's just that's how the market works. Ugh.
Yeah, yeah. I it's to me it's really interesting because it seems like the only explanation for someone to be to think that like a boycott isn't effective is if they're just simply uneducated.
I mean, I
But
think. Oh, sorry, you go.
yeah, but to me that it's like how's that possible? Like hasn't Alex been a vegan activist for like 5 years?
I think.
Like how is he not educated on this topic?
I think something I wanted to say was I forgot what I was gonna say. I think it had to do with boycotts. Shit, I forgot what I was gonna say.
Happens to the best of us.
Yeah, but more or less when it comes to boycotting any product service, oh yeah, right. It's arguments, right? So like, let's just say there's no evidence. Like you have a hypothesis economically. Like I've never heard of a hypothesis against supply and demand that I think is strong. like I haven't heard of an alternative argument. Like, what is the argument that supply and demand would not exist? You know, even when it comes to our relationships, supply and demand exists. If I'm lonely and want a friend, and if someone else wants a friend, then we both have a demand, and then we're both each other's supply. Like, even psychologically, this exists outside of commerce or like product and service market. Like, even when it comes to just human relations, like, this is why evolutionary scientists will refer to like sex as like the sexual marketplace. Like, what is your argument against supply and demand? I just haven't heard one. And I'm not saying all Cosmic Skeptic has one against supply and demand. It's just supply and demand will exist. So then you have to make an argument that would make sense within a supply and demand market, or you'd have to make an argument that supply and demand doesn't matter. And it just, when I've heard arguments like this, that boycotts don't matter, something that comes up is sometimes is supply and demand wouldn't exist in a socialist or a communist utopia or in this economic model, or supply and demand is, it's doo-doo or some crap like that. I know it's a bit silly, like what I'm saying. I don't remember. I can't paraphrase what someone said 2 years ago, but I've heard people try to deny supply and demand before. And I'm not saying Cosmic Skeptic is, but it's so silly.
Well, can I say something real quick?
What's up?
Even if you abolish the concept of money, you still need a way to allocate resources to like the people in need, and even if you had like a perfect communist society.
That's off topic, though. That's kind of off. I mean,
yeah, but
well, actually, no, it's kind of on topic, I guess. I don't know. Like, is this really related? Continue.
Yeah. So, like, basically, what I'm saying is, even if you wanted to, like, say, a personal boycott, even in like a perfect communist utopia, wouldn't work. Would just be inaccurate because it wouldn't grow meat if nobody wanted to eat it.
Yeah, I mean, what was it? I think going back, like, if there's one thing I wanted to come back to, it's like, I really wish Alex or Cosmic Skeptic would actually have a self-reflection and realize that if your moral system is dependent upon you should base, if everyone based their moral systems based on their own actions or what they could do, then literally everyone would be trying to claim what they're doing is moral because it makes them feel good, or what they're doing is moral because it's practical for them. Like, I sometimes wonder if Cosmic Skeptic cares more about being moral in his own eyes than actually living up to a particular principle. Like, if you failed at being vegan, and you need to eat animal products because your diet was improper or some crap. Okay, so what? You can just admit it. But why would you be upset that other people were following this diet? Like, it makes me wonder, like, what evidence has Alex seen? Like, what has convinced him? Like, it makes me wonder if he's just been, like, looking through Michaela Peterson, or if he's been looking through Sparage videos, or I probably shouldn't say their names. I'm gonna edit that. It makes me wonder if he's been looking at a bunch of, like, BS keto diet bullshit that's already been debunked.
I just think it's top tier coping.
You think it's just coping?
Yeah, he's just trying to make himself seem less of like unethical.
Yeah, I can't remember the way how Paradigm said it, but yeah, it's like it's this post, maybe it's just pure copium. But I mean, like, memes aside, I think what I'm trying to say here is, like, your moral system should be based on principles. It shouldn't be based on necessarily what you can complete. But I can't remember. How'd you say it, Paradigm? You really said it well.
I was basically saying that just because you yourself are unable to live up to these certain values, it doesn't mean that, like, all of a sudden those values should now go out the window, and you should take up whatever is you are personally capable of fulfilling, right? Because that brings us back to the reductio we brought up before, where you go, you're starving on an island and your morals break down, and get into a state of mind where you're unable to abide by your morals. Like, now is it okay to change your moral system such that you're saying, oh, well, I think it's wrong to kill somebody for your own benefit, but, now that I've done it, well, I don't think I'm capable of doing that, so I don't think other people should follow it.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
it's,
Well, you said it
yeah.
perfectly. You hit the nail. Just because you can't live up to your own morals doesn't necessarily mean that other people shouldn't. And I think that's probably like one of the most respectful things is when somebody can't live up to their own morals, but they admit that other people should. Like, because doing the opposite is like there's pros and cons. Like if you don't if because the problem is like if you acknowledge you're not living up to your own morals, then that means that you could be doing better. Which maybe you should. Maybe it just means you're too lazy. But then the other problem is like if you're not living up to your morals, and if you're changing your morals because you can't live up to them, then it's essentially saying that, in my opinion, it's essentially saying it's essentially just it's. I'm sorry. I kind of had a bit of a brain fart. If you cannot live up to your own morals, it's essentially it's essentially it's essentially encouraging people to set a lower bar for their own moral system because you yourself weren't able to live up to it. I guess what I'm trying to get at here is it's asking people within your community or association to lower their moral standard. So you yourself can actually fit within it.
Right, and this goes back to what you were mentioning earlier with the responsibility with respect to having a larger platform, because the actions that you take, the positions that you take, what you choose to share is going to have that much more of an impact when you have, for example, like Cosmic Skeptic, over 500,000 subscribers.
Yeah, keep in mind, everyone that I said, when I was talking about pescatarianism, I'm not the best well researched on it. I've only read a little bit about it. Just the record. So
And I
I would
definitely have much to learn too, but I mean, just from what I could tell, I can't really find anything that shows that it's unhealthy.
yeah, well, besides pollutants, but like but
I
yeah,
mean,
the
I've heard
product
that
itself.
claim, but I haven't seen it in the outcome data. That's the only
Exactly.
thing.
No, exactly. But yeah, well, keep in mind it's going to become more common though because like more and more the world is eating. So most of the research we get is like 10, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 5 years ago. So when you look at a research done in 2023, the papers they'll use will probably span back about 30 years. So a paper published in 2000 will maybe span back 30 years. In the last 15 years, in the last like 5 years, 6, 7, 8 years, 10 years, I don't know, last decade, we've essentially surpassed wild caught fish with factory farm fish. These outcomes could change drastically. Like, do you know what I'm getting at, Paradigm?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I went over it in my environmental video. Yeah, it is what it is. Like, I'm assuming you've seen Seaspiracy, right?
I certainly have.
Yeah, so you saw the part with the sea lice, right?
The sea what?
Sea lice, right?
Lice?
Sea lice.
I probably did. It's not coming to mind at the moment, to be
So
honest.
yeah, my environmental video in part 2, and even in I'll include in the description down here. So basically, there was a group of people. I think it was like I think this is like it's basically a research foundation, and I think it was either founded or funded or has some sort of association with David Suzuki, a famous Canadian scientist, and they actually were looking into the I can't remember what it's called, the very big fishing certification, sustainable fishing certification. They were looking into how many of them actually met their standards, and there were certain standards they all met, but there were other standards that none of them were, or very, very few of them were actually meeting. And I think sea lice was one of them, which is actually it's pretty nasty shit. So I was reading about sea lice as well. So the problem is with sea lice is that when they're eating these fish alive, the flesh that's on the fish could easily end up rotting or end up getting infected. And people can end up eating that, which is nasty as shit. So like health outcomes for pescatarians it's likely to change in the coming decades with more pollution to the ocean and sea lice. So like, do you see my position on this? Where I think I think people are underestimating it.
Yes.
Do you see my position, Paradigm, or do you think my position is perhaps maybe unfair?
I don't think it's unfair. I mean, it's a hypothesis, but I think until we actually have that data, it might be unfair to come to a conclusion just based off of that hypothesis.
I think that's yeah, I think that's great counter criticism. I'll keep that in mind. But yeah, I think that's why I was saying like I don't think it's particularly bad. It's just for that reason I would probably suspect being plant-based would be better if I had to take a guess, but once again it's a hypothesis.
Okay, but yeah, what about this question?
Can we say
Um,
let's stay on topic of this video if that's okay, Chatty?
well, yeah, I was gonna say on topic. I think, and I mean, I assume you guys will agree that one that what he's doing with regards to his diet is immoral. But I would also say, making this post is probably immoral too.
I mean,
And
oh, you go. Sorry.
yeah, yeah, and when people like make response videos and stuff like that, it's giving him attention, and I think that's beneficial to him. That's like a reward. So yeah, what do you guys think about the morality of like making a response video to something like this? Or this in particular, but also I guess there's the general question of something similar.
I mean, me personally, I have to take the agnostic position as to whether or not outcomes from, for example, giving attention to such a thing have a net drain or a net benefit on utility if we're talking about, for example, cruelty to animals and suchly things. Because on one hand, like, yeah, it's important to call out bullshit when we see it, but on the other hand, like when we do give more attention to these things, they do inevitably grow. And so I do see where you're coming from, but I'm not entirely sure that, for example, that like responding or giving him attention is necessarily a bad thing, right?
So I think
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'd agree. I'm agnostic too. I just think it's an interesting question.
I think I
Oh,
have
yeah, absolutely.
I think I have a position on this. So my position is so keep in mind we can give them more attention. We could also debunk their bad ideas or give counter criticism. But the way I see it is not like you have to keep in mind. So I'm looking at it from both the ideas going out and then the flow of people. So the market. So there's going to be vegans who will come to his video because we're talking about it and give him attention. Maybe they might become vegan. But we also have a chance to maybe get his subscribers to watch our video. And maybe go vegan or at least hear ideas. But then there's something else. So it's like so one of which is the flow of people, one of which is the two possibilities, and then I think there's a probability. I think the probability of giving somebody too much attention goes up depending on how many videos you make towards that person. Like, are you making one video? Are you making two videos? Are you making a million different videos about this person? So, like, I guess when it comes down to it, like, with all due respect to Vegan Gains, like, how much attention he gave to Frank may have been a bad thing. It may have been just hear me out. Like, so when it came to like how much attention he gave to Frank Tefano, I am unsure if it was a bad thing. But if I had to say yes when I was watching his videos, I think it was because Vegan Gains was giving him constant attention. I think if Vegan Gains made a few videos criticizing Frank Tefano and then left him alone, his channel would never have grown as much as it did. So I think when it comes down to it, I think the probability of giving someone attention and also helping them grow their own audience increases with the amount of response videos done. So I think like when something happens, like an incident happened, like with John Venus, when there's lots of different content creators making videos, yeah, sure, they're giving his channel attention. But then we also have to ask ourselves, like, what do we have to do? What do we have to say to convince his audience that this person's wrong? Because it's possible to give someone attention and to destroy their narrative or even to steal their subscribers. Like, actually, y'all want to hear a funny story?
Yeah, sure.
Completely unrelated, but very similar to what Chatty's criticism. Chatty, you want to hear a story? Or do you have any thoughts on what I said first?
Yeah, I mean, you can go ahead with your story, then we can continue.
So do you agree with me, though, like, that there's a flow of people, the flow of ideas, and then the probability? And then we need to try and consider all those things.
What the probability of what?
Oh, the probability of growing their following, giving them attention. Too much attention.
You mean like if you make a video, like what's the probability that the video will grow their following? But like
Not so
let's
much,
say
not so
Vegan
much
Gains makes a
video,
video
but
on
how much
flank chop.
attention. I'd say how much attention. Like, basically, the argument I'm making is if you give someone too much attention for a certain period of time, that can be a really bad thing. The argument I'm making is that even though giving somebody a lot of attention at one specific time, even though it could be a bad thing, I think the probability is much lower so long as it's not for a long period of time.
Okay. Oh, so as long as it's not like consistent, like if you release a video every week talking about how bad Cosmic Skeptic is, that would be bad. But if you just release it one time, then that wouldn't be bad.
Or maybe once every 4 months or 6 months or like 3 months. Yeah, or at least like essentially you're not giving them, the goal would be to minimize it. Or to really, or at least to ask yourself if it's if the criticism outweighs the negative of the amount of attention given. Or yeah, anyways, so like here's the story. So like Paradigm, History Strongest Desire, so way back in like 2019, 2018, I watched, what was it? I actually ended up with like watching a lot of the Red Pill community content. That's how I ended up criticizing Andrew Tate, making some criticism of him way before he was famous. Um, but what was it? There was this one content creator named MGTOW Dictionary. I heard about him. I went onto a stream and he was criticizing a bunch of dating coaches. And there was one person who I was following, and I actually found him because he was he used to be called Simple Programmer, and he gave advice for computer programming. I decided not to follow it, but I was just subscribed to him. Then he became like a pickup artist and Bulldog Mindset. Basically, they were all criticizing him, and I mean, like I ended up unsubscribing when I heard their criticism, and their criticism was fucking disgusting. Like the people he was associating with, somebody who had done a number of inappropriate things with minors, frauds, liars. At a certain point, I think giving someone attention can be destructive. And I think there's been plenty of examples of this on the
Yeah.
internet, right? Like,
Yeah,
I guess what
like
I'm
Pro
trying to say-
Jared. You guys remember Pro Jared? That
yeah, but he did come
I don't-
back. I mean, he did come back with some receipts, though. I mean, at least so I hear. I don't know
Yeah,
if he did.
no,
At
I
least
think
that's
you're
a
right,
narrative.
but
I think that's a narrative. I didn't
Yeah.
watch. I didn't watch his response. But apparently,
I
everyone's
mean-
saying he came back with receipts.
yeah, I'm not going to argue anything about Pro Jared other than like he lost a lot of subscribers, he lost a lot of attention, and he lost a lot of money because of what happened.
I mean, like, I may as well say this to the audience. I unsubscribed from Cosmic Skeptic, and maybe you should too. Like, I don't know, that's a bold statement to say, but I don't think he's worth supporting. To the audience, if you're listening to this, I don't think Cosmic Skeptic is worth supporting. I mean, like, imagine if someone went on YouTube and they actually said they're skeptical that, humans have any influence on climate change. Keyword any influence. The consensus is it's there. Humans do have an influence on climate change. But if someone came forward and made that claim, we have absolutely no influence on climate change, or it's if they're claiming to be if they're claiming to be a channel that's supposed to be intellectually thoughtful, I don't see that to be a channel worth supporting at all. I mean, getting the average Joe to understand that is just it's exhausting. But Paradigm, do you have anything to say?
Well, I mean, this is slightly off top, not off topic, but slightly different than what you were talking about. But I think that we should also try to give him a fair shake if we can, because he hasn't shared all the details. It might not be as bad as it sounds, because, for example, he said, I have for some time now been consuming animal products again, primarily but not exclusively seafood, right? So, like, if I was to, like, imagine the best case scenario for this, like, maybe he's consuming non-sentient animals like bivalves, and, you know, perhaps when he's consuming animal products, he's consuming backyard eggs, right? So there's not, like, a tremendous amount of harm that's being entailed compared to like a factory farming situation, right? And so I think, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree with you.
And so I think that like there is still hope for him, but it's going to depend on how he addresses this whole situation. And I for one have been advocating that he speak with Avi, because Avi is a vegan doctor who is well versed in nutrition. He's well versed in philosophy. He'll be able to address. He actually has data and calculations that specifically show that for example, that when you're participating in a boycott, that it makes a meaningful difference in the total amount of harm that gets entailed. And so he can address his health concerns. He can address the appropriateness of an individual focused boycott. And I think that, and he's spoken with, I think, Ask Yourself and Vegan Gains before in the past. And so I think that if he would maybe get on another call with Avi and Isaac and Richard, that it could potentially bring him back from this weirdness that he's coming out with now. But yeah, I think that like barring that happening, probably we should be unsubscribing.
I mean, honestly, I think it's still worth unsubscribing. I think it's worth listening to his response. And I think the audience should be open to maybe hearing him out. Because best case scenario is maybe he was eating bivalves, and maybe he was, maybe he's a freegan. Maybe he gave up on the definition of veganism. Maybe he was vegan to our ethical definition. Now, I doubt it. But I highly doubt that is the case. And even if he actually, let's say, went full freegan, just the fact that I hold Cosmic Skeptic to a higher standard than someone, let's say, PewDiePie, or let's say a garbage tier political pundit like, I don't know, Steven Crowder or the Young Turks. Like, I hold Cosmic Skeptic just to a higher standard. Maybe he's not familiar with the hierarchy of evidence. Do you know if Cosmic Skeptic is?
I do not know.
Yeah, maybe he's not familiar with how to interpret data. But it's just the problem I have here is if he's unsure, like he has a large following. Like if he had a doctor in his community, I'm absolutely sure one of them would probably be willing to talk with him. Like it's so fucking annoying because like even if absolute best case scenario, I still think he's worth unsubscribing because of what he said about the health claims. It's not an intellectual community that's worth supporting at that point. And it kind of stings for me to say that because I like Alex. I like him as a person.
Yeah, he's a likable guy.
Yeah, I really do.
Yeah, you know what though? Yeah, I think that even the best case scenario is really bad. Like even if you're right, and let's say he's only consuming animal products in like
as
a way,
freegan.
Yeah, we could say like a way that a lot of people would say like, well, that's not really immoral, whether it's like from the garbage or backyard eggs or oysters or something similar like this, where it's not like clearly immoral. This post to me seems obviously immoral to make, and the views that he's espousing, like that it's that boycotts aren't effective, or that like plant-based diets aren't healthy for everyone. Like
Yeah.
these views aren't
Yeah.
just wrong, but they're detrimental to like espouse them.
Yeah, I guess
So
Yes.
I guess what I was trying to get at is like if intellectual viewers don't hold him to a higher standard for doing his own research, then intellectual communities uh it'll just become more normalized for intellectual communities to make these types of silly, unethical comments. Oh, Paradigm, you want to say something?
No, I was just gonna say I can completely see where you're coming from.
But yeah, I think what you had to say was important too, because like we do have to listen to his follow up and give him a chance to be heard out. But I think what really motivated me to like talk about this was just like, somebody I know, the guy who owns the vegan cult, Thomas, he was inspired by Cosmic Skeptic's speech, and it's just so sad that somebody who was so passionate and gave such a passionate speech, ended up becoming such a maybe he always was, but ended up becoming such a silly fool.
Yeah,
yeah,
it's ineffably disappointing if I do say so myself. And I even have someone in my server who was like, I actually went vegan because of Cosmic Skeptic and Earthling Ed, and yet now that he's coming out with this, they were saying I don't even have words for how disappointed I am.
Well,
yeah. I went vegan because of Cosmic Skeptic, and that's true of a lot of people that I know. So yeah, I certainly see why he's like the most disappointing person to revert, I guess.
well,
Yeah, I agree.
Hey, Paradigm, I may have had a lot of progress with my working out. Like I can do handstand push-ups. It's improved over the years. But because I've
Nice.
gotten so many injuries, I am now skeptical that somebody can work out and be healthy.
Ah,
You know,
yes, of
I made
course.
mistakes in my form. I made mistakes pushing myself too hard. But, you know, it wasn't me. It was working out. I soulfully apologize to anyone that works out because of me. Go eat
And
some
certainly,
go eat some
certainly,
Doritos.
hopefully, yeah, hopefully no one
Doritos.
is working out on your account.
Yeah, and
I would,
hopefully, yeah, yeah, don't work out my account. Go eat French fries. Go eat vegan ice cream, and don't work out. You know, it doesn't work. Forget about the overwhelming evidence. I'm also gonna make a post about this when I have like 500K followers. Sorry, 500K subscribers. And you know, and I'll continue to actually believe that I'm an intellectually honest person and an intellectually respectable person. But like humor aside, like I sometimes find it easier to articulate myself through humor when I'm tired. It's like how does somebody actually make a post like that and actually believe that they're worth respecting intellectually? It's just so disheartening. Like I mean like have you ever heard of like what was that? Hey Paradigm, I'm assuming Chatty and Paradigm, neither of you guys have seen my video on like my thoughts on Thomas Sowell's and intellectuals in society. Trying to
I feel
summarize.
like I feel like I might have seen some of it.
I'll try and summarize. Like, the problem with intellectuals is quite often they end up like stepping over. Like, if Cosmic Skeptic actually wants to do more research, then good for him. He's not a garbage tier intellectual, but like, there's a possibility Cosmic Skeptic might end up pulling a garbage tier intellectual move, where they end up believing in themselves so much, or their followers believe in them so much, or for whatever reason, they end up thinking their success in one thing transfers over to another. Or in other words, like maybe because he thinks he's really good at critically thinking on his own, that he can critically think about what a good diet is. I highly doubt that is the case. I highly doubt he's going to purely appeal to his own anecdotes, but like
Ooh,
it
I
does.
hope not, but
It,
there's
there's a
there's something
chance.
in my gut that like makes me feel like he might be going there.
Yes, yeah, yeah. I think the point of what I'm saying here is he might end up pulling a garbage tier intellectual move where he's a very smart person who's successful at something, and because he's successful, he doesn't actually second guess himself as a failure. He sees himself as a success. I didn't say that in my video, but you know, I'm trying to summarize up like a really thoughtful topic in like 20 minutes.
Yeah, you know what though? Like I think I did watch that video actually, but and I noticed that problem with a lot of people,
Jordan
but
Peterson, Noam
yeah,
Chomsky.
like Jordan Peterson, who's Neil deGrasse Tyson, like all of these people, like all of these public intellectuals, they just talk confidently about topics that they have no understanding of.
Yeah, it's like they see
But
them. It's like they
I
see. Yeah, it's like they see themselves as successful, so they don't see the failures in themselves. Almost.
but one of the things that I thought was good about Cosmic Skeptic was I felt like he was so he'd never talk confidently about things that he didn't understand, and I thought that was the case. Like if you watch like him talking to people like William Lane Craig, like even when he absolutely disagrees with this guy, he won't talk confidently. So I didn't think that he'd be the kind of guy who would like, you know. But yeah, but what's worse is that this is supposed to be his area of expertise. Like this is one of the things that he's like known for is veganism, and he has no idea what he's talking about.
He's always, I hate to say this, but he hasn't been the best advocate. Like from his definition to arguing that you could eat animal products when when you're overseas and you didn't plan a plant-based travel. Um, to how he talked when he was talking to Michaela Peterson, how he came across as a little too charitable to her obvious bullshit. When it comes to, by the way, when I say that Michaela Peterson's obvious bullshit, like whether this is Dr. Avi, Vegan Gains, Mike the Vegan, there are tons and tons and tons and tons of content creators that have put forward. Um, I'll leave maybe some of them in the description. That put forward videos with tons of studies debunking Michaela Peterson's claims. So it's just, or even if you don't like the word debunk, offering tons of counter criticism and factually explaining why Michaela Peterson is wrong. But yeah, it's like I think the problem that, hey Paradigm, did you want to say something or mind if I continue?
Oh no, you're good.
I think a problem when people have health issues is like, let's say if I eat meat, right? So I go to my grocery store, let's say I pick up like some steak and I eat it. Then, the next day I pick up a vegan veal and all of a sudden I have an allergic reaction. Okay, let's say this happens again and again and again. Maybe I have a gluten allergy. Maybe I have a soy allergy. Maybe I have intolerance to certain types of lentils. But the reality is let's say if there's a certain type of food that your body is reacting to, there's two things you need to keep in mind. One of which is that might just be you. That might not be everyone. So let's just say like there's a 1 in a million chance that Michaela Peterson, in a hypothetical, Michaela Peterson can only eat meat to be healthy. That doesn't necessarily mean that it applies to everyone. Her own anecdotal experience. Number two is I think an issue that a lot of people run into is like whenever it comes to these types of meals, if there's, let's say, for some reason unforeseen health health consequence of being let's say eating whatever you're eating, let's just say you get rid of what you were eating, there could be many reasons as to why you had an unforeseen health problem. It could have been the thing that you were like, it could have been the thing that you were eating, could have been an allergy. Let's say I'm eating broccoli, maybe not broccoli. Let's say I'm eating whatever. Let's say a plant-based sausage. Let's say there could be a lot of chemicals in there. There could be tons of different things I'm allergic to. It could have been a deficiency. It could have been there basically, when it comes to like actual nutritional science and actually figuring out what's wrong with you, there is such a complexity of different potential causers that whatever you think is correlated with your problem, it doesn't always necessarily mean that it's causation. Like your health problems is a questionable cause.
Yeah, that's one thing that I thought was worth bringing up as well is, I mean, he obviously didn't go into any details about like why he's been struggling to have a healthy plant-based diet, but like assuming that he's having health problems and he's attributing those to his diet, I mean, we might be just looking at a post hoc fallacy,
Yeah, it's
right? Because there's so many different factors. I mean, obviously there's nothing that's been controlled when it's just an anecdote. And so like vegans get health problems, non-vegans get health problems, and like it's not necessarily because of the diet, right?
yeah. It like yeah, when it comes down to it, I'm actually looking at post hoc. It was I know wasn't post hoc one of the questionable causes?
So questionable clauses.
Yeah, I can't remember which one was post hoc. After this, therefore
Post hoc,
because oh
yeah,
yeah,
post
so
hoc ergo propter
after
hoc.
this, therefore this. After this,
Yes.
therefore because of this. Yeah, so like
Uh-huh.
yeah, so like let's say he ate a plant-based meal, and let's just say he wasn't getting enough calcium. He could have maybe fixed that with tofu. He could have fixed that with soy milk. Let's say he wasn't getting enough iron. Maybe he could have been more chickpeas. Like, it's just it's a lot of these things are just real questionable causes. And I remember like a there was a hypothesis. I can't remember which plant-based doctor, but he had a hypothesis that the longer you've been eating animal products, the more your body has really been adapted to it. Um, and he actually had a hypothesis that people who are, by the way, this is just a hypothesis, this is not proven, so nobody take this out of context. I'll include the video in the description. But he basically had the hypothesis that people who were plant-based since childhood, that their bodies were more designed for it. And in his own words, they're a different animal. There's a nutritionist in my server named T3. He actually gave a long rant in my archive about his hypothesis that some people's ability to digest certain plant-based proteins or certain types of plant-based nutrients can potentially temporarily be turned off if after a long period of time. Now, these are just like hypotheses, right? But I guess what I'm trying to say here is like there's all these different possibilities that are going on. Um, and let's just take a more charitable note, right? Let's just say that his body wasn't used to absorbing certain types of plant-based nutrition. Maybe that could have been just fixed with a multivitamin. Maybe that could have just been fixed with, I don't know, eating more of a certain type of food. Um, it's I don't know, it's just so silly. Like no matter what possibility I can think of another solution. Generally speaking, if it's like some sort of deficiency. It's like, let's just say like if just because most people aren't getting enough fiber, that's not necessarily an argument as to why people need to go vegan. It's no
No.
different than saying like let's just say most vegans don't get enough B12 in a hypothetical. And I think usually in most studies I've seen it's usually the case. Um and don't get me wrong, omnivores are more likely to have fluoride deficiencies and other deficiencies. And in some studies I think even like calcium. I can't remember which mineral. But I think like looking at systematic review, like all groups had deficiencies, vegetarians, vegans, and so on. But like just because vegans have deficiencies in something, that doesn't mean that you should not be vegan. It just means you should look out for that. Like deficiencies on average.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think he didn't obviously specify because he deliberately didn't go into detail, but he's the type of person that we know he has the means with which to hire, for example, a dietitian if he had concerns about his health with respect to his diet, right? And so he could very, very easily just be like, am I getting the nutrients that I need? Could this problem be caused by my diet, right? And a dietitian would be able to sort that out with him. But I can't say for certain, but I have a hunch that he didn't do any of that.
Mm-hmm. I think like one of my biggest problems is like when I think about this is what if the possibility like Cosmic Skeptic is being bad faith? What if he knows he fucked up on his nutritional diet and now he's trying to have like a rationalize, now he's trying to rationalize his preconceived conclusion.
That would just be pathetic.
Well, that's a
Yeah,
possibility.
you know
Like,
what?
well, I'm just saying, what if there's a possibility? Like, I don't think this is the case, but what if maybe Cosmic Skeptic is being bad faith or is thinking irrationally. That's also a possibility,
Yeah,
right?
Sure.
yeah. You know what? I guess I don't get is not just Cosmic Skeptic, but a lot of other like ex-vegans or whatever. Uh, b- like, let's say you've been vegan for I think he's been vegan for 5 years, and then all of a sudden you start getting some health problem, like you're tired all the time, or whatever it is. I don't understand why you would think your diet has anything to do with that.
That
Especially,
I
yeah,
agree.
yeah, especially like even if you think it's your diet, why would you think that you need to start consuming animal products? Because you've been fine for 5 years. Like, how does this?
There's also another thing like there's also the possibility that when somebody has some sort of health problem and they go vegan, there's also a possibility that that health problem might already exist on an omnivore diet or on an alternative diet. Basically, there's a possibility that health problems still exist, but they're just less aware. Like, let's just say somebody has a deficiency in absorbing a certain nutrient, and they've actually been deficient in it when they've been omnivore, but they didn't notice it. Then all suddenly they went vegan and it got a little worse. Let's just say their body has an absorption issue. It might be useful to be educated on that absorption issue rather than giving up a plant-based diet. And it's this lack of curiosity. But I think honestly, a part of me sometimes thinks that Cosmic Skeptic here is just being bad faith. Like, there's a part of me that thinks that like he's too smart to say something that's stupid. Like, I mean, he's too smart to uh, that's not quite what I'm saying. A part of me thinks he's too smart to actually say this when he's thinking rationally and calmly. That's what I'm trying to say. Um, I'm not sure if this, if maybe you feel the same way, Paradigm, but maybe he has just had some issues, and maybe he knows he might be full of shit, and that's why he's taking some time to think about how he's going to word it. And maybe when he articulates it, maybe he leaves out certain key details that would actually hold him more accountable.
Hmm.
Like, I don't know, maybe he never used a meal planner and he just leaves that out when he makes a video. And he just says he tries his best.
Right, right. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how he expounds on this later.
Yeah, but do you think maybe I might be right with what I said? Like, he's too stupid to say this when he's thinking like completely rationally. I mean, sorry, he's,
I
he's
mean,
not
it's
he's too stupid, he's too smart to say something this stupid.
yeah,
Thinking completely rationally.
it's certainly tempting. It's certainly tempting to believe that. I will say.
All right. Well, I think we've
But
oh sorry.
I try to be as charitable as possible, and no, you're fine. You were gonna say?
Uh I think we're pretty much done here. So like anybody want to make a closing statement?
Uh, I mean, I just wanted to say thank you for having me on. It's been a great discussion, and I've really appreciated discussing with both of you.
Oh,
And yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out.
yeah, I want to have you on more often. I enjoy talking to you. Chad, do you have any closing statements?
No. Or apparently he's been vegan for 3 years. Or something like that. I said 5, but I mean either way.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
I think it's actually been closer to 3. So I think my closing statement would be you don't have to trust me because I'm a vegan. You don't have to look at you don't have to look at any of my research. If you want to understand how to interpret research, you should look at the hierarchy of evidence. Then learn about what randomized control studies, case studies, meta-analysis, systematic review, write this down, case control. Basically, what I'm trying to say here is even if you don't trust any of the studies I put forward in my description, just go learn on how to interpret studies yourself. And then once you learn that, you can look at any studies. You can look at my studies. You can look at someone's studies that, claim that eating only animal products is good for you. You can look at any studies you want. Then look at, try to figure out if studies have been funded. Basically, what I'm trying to say here is you don't have to trust any of the research I put forward or anyone else. You can learn and think for yourself. There are tons of other content creators that have been criticizing narratives claiming that veganism cannot be healthy, when from what I've seen, the overwhelming consensus show that vegans can be healthy. And when studies show you how the studies were conducted, like their methods, if they controlled people's diets, population studies, it gives the study more merit. Go look at the research. Go learn how to interpret the research. Then come to your own decision. And there's tons of content creators that are really pushing hard to try and break common held beliefs that are myths. And it's just like any other scientific myth. Sometimes bad ideas are popularized, or false ideas. I'm sorry, that was a mouthful. Anyways, I think what do I say? Thank you for watching, everyone. Please do everything you can to support the channel. Share, like, whatever. And have an amazing 24 hours.
So